What's up, everybody? So Gen 4 has just been released for our Kingdom 194. So I want to go over these and kind of touch base on my thoughts on the Gen 4 heroes, which ones are worth it, which ones aren't, depending on what your goals are in this game. So first, just go for an overview of what the various generations' stats had, because honestly, the biggest difference between each one, besides skills, is the amount of attack, defense, lethality, and health you're going to get from each generation. So to recap, on Generation 2, we were getting 240% for attack and defense and 60% for health and lethality. Generation 3, that bumped up to 290% for attack and defense and 70% for health and lethality. And then in Generation 4, there's a fairly big jump to 370% for attack and defense and 92.5% for health and lethality. Obviously, the oddball here is Amadeus, who, he's at 260, and then for health, for attack and defense, and then 62.5 for lethality and health. Sorry, attack and defense is 260, and then the other is for lethality and health. All right, so the first hero we have here is Alcar. Looking at his conquest skills, the first one is that Alcar enters in an invulnerable state, unable to move or cast spells, immune to control effects, and reduces damage taken by 30% for nearby friendly squads for 2 seconds. So this appears to play, this goes up to 70%, but it appears to apply only to Alcar, that he can't have spells that stop him, so those ones that stun people and whatnot, those won't work on him, and whatever kind of spells they have going for those. But he also reduces damage taken for nearby squads for 2 seconds. That seems like a fairly decent one because these battles don't really last that long, so you might get like 20% of the battle that actually is affected by that. The second one is that Alcar spears a line of enemies, dealing 70% attack damage and increases the damage taken for the enemies by 20% for 2 seconds. And this goes up to 98%. That seems fairly significant, so I think that that is one that is probably going to be a pretty big factor in Conquest. And then finally we have that Alcar's loyalty to the old ways gives him strength. Glorious Mark restores attack 30% health every second for 5 seconds. And that goes up to 42%. Not really sure how well that applies in Conquest, but those are the skills. And if you know me, I don't really care about Conquest, I just do it for the myth roll. But let's look at the real skills. So over here is upright skill, and this is the one that's going to count when you're joining a rally. It states that Alcar's utter dedication to keeping his men safe is well proved. Reduces infantry and archer damage taken by up to 70% every 5 seconds for 2 turns. That's an interesting one. Or every 5 turns for 2 turns. Sorry, not 5 seconds. So I think in a typical situation, you're probably going to be able to hit that maybe 1 or 2 times when it's just a solo attack, and then if it's a rally attack when you've got big squads, you might be able to get like 4 iterations out of that. So it could be pretty significant. So damage taken down by 70%, that's pretty good. So obviously it's defensive skill, and that'll be maybe something you use when you're in a garrison or something like that. The second one is infantry damage up 100%, and cavalry and archer damage up by 10%. And this one is pretty good. The infantry damage up is pretty significant. That really is. It's, obviously an offensive skill. And so I think that is I think that's going to be a pretty big factor in a lot of these things offensively. So not a bad skill. This next one is damage dealt per attack by, This one increases infantry damage dealt per attack by 12% and target damage dealt by 5% for 1 turn. So this goes up to 60% extra damage for 1 turn, I think. And then the other one is enemy damage taken down by 25% for 1 turn. This may not be as great of a skill as it appears, just because if you're in that solo where you're hitting one person one-on-one, you don't get that many iterations of how many times they kind of run the battle behind the scenes, if you will. But when you get into rallies, they go much longer. So it seems like a better one if you're doing a one-on-one attack, maybe in Swordland or something. But it's not going to be that great in a rally, I don't believe. So as far as Alcar is concerned, and then let's talk about his widget. So his widget is actually a defensive widget of 15% health up. So from my perspective, Alcar is great if you are running Zoe and that is your main infantry hero, because he is a good offensive and has defensive traits to him. So if you're like free to play, or you just really never want to get into the Amadeus thing or the Eric thing, he's probably a great guy to have to take the place of Zoe, just because, you know, the damage difference between the health, the damage, the lethality, and the health and the attack between Gen 2 and Gen 4 is very significant. And Alcar's a great guy for all-around offense and defense. Now, conversely, if you have Amadeus and Eric maxed out, I don't think you should go for Alcar at all. He's got definitely better skills than, I'm not better skills, but better stats than Amadeus offensively, but he doesn't have the widget, right? And that's a big deal. The reason why Amadeus stays so relevant for so long is because he's the only infantry besides Helga, which doesn't really matter, that has an offensive widget. And it seems like that's going to be the case for the foreseeable future. I don't think they've ever come out with an offensive widget for infantry in Whiteout Survival, and they're into like Generation 13 or something. And I think that's how they kind of keep Amadeus relevant. And let me just show you the difference between the offensive widget for somebody like Amadeus. And so Amadeus's widget is a 15% rally boost. So if you look over here, let me see. Let's find my beast attack. So this is against the beast with Amadeus, right? So here, none of these widgets are going to attach. You know, Petra also has a 15% rally attack boost. So you can see my stats are about in the 800s range or so. Now take a look at how much this goes up when you get down to a rally attack. You're now in the thousands, right? So I do believe that the fact that he is going to apply over 100% damage, like you're getting this 200%, 300% damage range right here where you're increasing. I do believe that that widget is more valuable than having Alcar take it over. It's going to be close, and I think when you get to Generation 5, it's probably at that point that the hero for infantry, even with a defensive widget, is probably going to overtake Amadeus. But right now, I don't think that's the case. And conversely, when you look at Eric, he's just pure defense, right? So if you're going to be in a garrison and you want a purely defensive guy, I mean, this is the guy to go with, because it's like enemy attack down 20%, damage taken down 20%, health up 25%, pure defense. And I don't think that you're going to be able to beat that with Alcar defensively. So my take on Alcar is, like I said before, if you're running Zoe, get Alcar. If you're not, skip him. Now, also, if you are free to play and you don't have just, you know, if you're looking for the best one to get, I would probably even wait till Generation 5, because this is when the equivalent of Hector should be coming out, and Hector is a big deal in Whiteout Survival. So that's another option for you, is just skip him and just wait for, you know, Generation 5, when you're going to get these more insane boosts on everything else. So that's my take on him. Next, we have Rosa. And Rosa, let's go through a conquest real quick. So Rosa clears all debuff, controls, etc. for all squads, increases their attack by 3% for 3 seconds, which they remain immune to debuffs. This goes to 7% and 5%. That's a big deal, so that's going to debuff everybody, not just Alcar like the other one where he was the only one immune. Debuff everybody, very strong skill. This one is damage up by 300%, very strong. And then finally we have this where Rosa's dancing is wonderful distraction from the tyranny of the battlefield, reducing attack speed by up to 3%, and heal effects by up to 60% for all enemy squads. So that's pretty good too. So I think she's actually probably one of the strongest conquest heroes, even though I don't really pay attention to this too very much. Now, the more important part, let's look at her skills. The upper right skill, the rally joining skill, Rosa grants a 40% chance of increasing all squads' damage dealt by 10%, which goes up to 50%. So that's essentially a 20% damage up. Good skill. Damage up is better than having attack up or lethality up, so that's a good skill. Next we have enemy damage down by 20%. That's nice because it's not chance-based, so it will bring enemy damage down by 20% no matter what. But she is an offensive hero, so it's still valuable, but it's, I kind of like all offensive generally. It just doesn't happen anymore. And finally, this one is attack up by 30%, but only to archers. So that's not really an ideal one. I mean, archers are the strongest as far as attack is concerned, so it's going to be more buff than that. But in some ways, if you think about this, if you're going to get a squad attack by, 30% or, 15%, it's probably going to be more than her getting 30% on archers alone. So it's not that great, but her widget is a lethality-based widget, a lethality up by 15%. So for me personally, I'm going to get Rosa, and I think that if you are free to play or low spend or whatever, she's probably the one that you want to get because she is an offensive hero, and she is going to be very strong to the point that she takes over Marlin. And Marlin, honest to God, was like my favorite hero. Just he had such strong skills and whatnot, but you just can't beat those attack, defense, and lethality buffs from that. And so I think that she's a good person to get. If you're still working on Marlin and you're not getting crazy deep into this, that you could probably pass her, but she is probably the one to get out of everybody else. Plus, she's available on the wheel, so she's kind of like free to play friendly, Margot is the last one we have. Let's just go over her conquest real quick. For her, the first one is effect damage up by 420%. That's pretty good. Next one is dodge probability by 25%. So she's going to make, let's see, is it everybody? All damage from any attacks. So I'm not sure if this applies just to her or the whole squad or not, but still being able to like dodge all those attacks is pretty good. So that's a pretty good conquest one. And then finally, dealing up to 140% damage and immobilizing for 1.5 seconds. Super strong. So I think I'll probably be running her and Rosa in my conquest. I would have done anyway because they default to the strongest ones. But they seem to have good skills. Like, you remember Jaeger, I think he's got a skill that actually helps the defense. Like, I don't know where they came up with that, but that just doesn't make any sense. So now let's talk about the real skills. This first upper right is an attack skill up 25%. So here we have a good rally joiner one for like bear or anything else where it's actually going to make a difference, right? I don't think it's as good as like Chenko with a 20. I think Chenko's got 25% lethality, which I think is better. Yeah, but still 20%. You can use her in bear, and it's not like messing up rallies and anything like that. Pretty good skill too. And that is squad attack, so that's nice. All right, so next one is dodge probability at 20%. This is really good, I think. This is kind of like every 5 attacks, they're going to completely get 0 damage on you, and that's pretty awesome. So, and honestly, I don't know if this is the same as if it was like damage reduction by 20% or not, but it probably is a little better just because I can't really give a good reason for it, but I think since there's 0 chance that they're going to get any damage against you, that's probably better than whatever else may be going on, these algorithms and whatnot. And finally, the last one is a 25% chance of performing extra damage dealt to 200%. This is very much like Hildy, if you remember. Hildy had one very similar to this. %, chance of dealing 200% damage. Yeah. So I'm going to be replacing Hildy with Margot, and she is a defensive hero, and her defensive widget is to take lethality. Let's see. Hers is lethality. When you're defending, your lethality will go up 15%. So it helps out the defender lethality. So it's kind of an interesting skill. So things to note about these widgets is there's certain things you could do that are kind of interesting. Like, for instance, if you decide to go with Alcar, which, I don't think he's really that great for people who are going like crazy and trying to get all these heroes and whatnot. But if you do get Alcar and you max out his widget, and then you got Jaeger and you max out his widget, and you have Hildy, you max out her widget, you can actually get a 45% health buff, which is probably about as good as you're going to get. I mean, they tend to say that health is better than defense and whatnot, so that'd be kind of interesting to see. I won't ever do it, but that's that. So for me, Margot is worth getting to replace Hildy if you are like taking garrisons and filling the garrisons. These are pretty good skills too offensively, but it's going to be kind of like getting it's going to be kind of like if you don't mess with widgets and you're just going to keep them low forever, and you don't have really high widgets on any of your offensive heroes, she might be worth getting too, because her skills are all pretty much offensive like. And I kind of wish they had given her an offensive widget, but they didn't. So it is what it is. So for me, being somebody who wants to get the best heroes for everything going on, I will be running Amadeus, Petra, and Rosa for my offense, and on defense I'll be running Eric, Margot, and Jaeger. So those are the heroes that I'll be running, and I think that's a pretty good summary of what's going on with these. So let me know if you got any questions in the comments, and then hope you all